They'll blanket you in Wi-Fi and profit off the radiation. Congregation collecting the people for that Satan. I keeps it blazing, cause I can read between the lines. I ain't blind, we unwind what they're really saying. Genetically modify what you're tasting. Don't need that college promise, so now you live up in your mom's basement. Redesign time so your mind is always wasted. Program to crave the basics. Keep the beta in stasis. Pay the state, kid. You're in debt for being born. Messengers are more than just the price for being warned. Don't be alarmed. Disconnect from their machinations. Stop subscribing to the folly of own nations. Bone breaking ain't the answer, cause they seek the ownership of souls. Spread the seeds and watch them grow. Break the chains of control. Break the chains of control.
Sweet eternal balance of all that is good, true, and beautiful, friends. Tonight on Rogueways, I am drenched in delight to invite one of my heroes in the culture wars waged by the psychopathic, narcissistic, and borderline personality disorder warriors who have been mind-controlled into giving up their self-responsibility in order to take the easy way out and make every little thing your fault and your responsibility to fix for them. What a nightmare the world has become. However, with people who lived through the traumas at the hands of narcissistic mothers, who recovered from the internalized self-hate and self-abdication, and who came back better than ever, not only to speak truth to their web of lies, but also to adroitly and expertly dismantle the untruths publicly for all of our benefit. With people like this, we have hope. Josh Slocum hosts my favorite podcast, Disaffected, and does all this with sass and wit, academic rigor and intelligence, absolute commitment to logic, and even the rarest of gifts, self-approbation when required, and prudent. Holy cow. Welcome to the show, Josh Slocum. It is an honor and a pleasure, and how are you doing tonight?
Thank you. How many personality disorders did you just diagnose me with?
Only 6. It's okay. We'll get through this together. It's seriously,
Wait, there's more.
I try to get people to listen to your show all of the time, and I don't think they understand how great it is. So I'm really so excited that you're here so we get to talk about all of this.
Good. Well, then let me clarify for people. I happen to host the best and only podcast, so obviously you should be watching it, except for yours, Lindsay.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I get to be in there too. Well, before we really dive in, I want to just remind people there's a Mother's Day sale going on at the site, so you can use the code BLESSEDMOTHER and get discounts on any of the pendants, the Oregon Lotus, votives, or the pillars. Those are all on sale with the code BLESSEDMOTHER. For Mother's Day, give her a beautiful handmade gift and support the show at the same time. And Josh, I always have a pointless question of the episode, and for you, I'm asking, which mythological creature would you love to spend time with, and why?
Oh, that's a good one, and that wasn't something I could prepare for. Which mythological
I like to spring random things on people that they never thought they were going to be asked. It's like my favorite thing to do.
I don't blame you. Yeah, I do a quiz like that. I ask people to answer mayo or mustard. It confuses them, and then I grade them on their answers.
Yes. I'm judging you.
I'm definitely judging you. Favorite? Okay, well, in a complicated way, I'd say Medusa.
Ooh.
For reasons that will probably become obvious to anyone who listens to the rest of this show. But I have a thing about Gorgon women, and we're swimming in them right now. Yeah. Having been raised by a snake-headed woman, I do find it fascinating. Actually, I do think Medusa is one of the most interesting mythological characters, and like many of them, a tragic and a malevolent component.
Mm. And like many of them, they probably intentionally represent aspects of our psyche on purpose, like everything in fiction does, right? But they like more so, like here's the complex, or here's the like issue and situation that people have to deal with.
Yeah, I think our mythology and our folklore are repositories. I mean, I know it sounds cliche to say, but they are wisdom.
Yeah.
Our fairy tales, especially for children, are moral instruction. They're not just moral instruction. They're education in the kinds of dangerous people that you need to watch out for, and how to identify them, and what kinds of disguises they use. This is what fairy tales are for, and I think that and I think also that the very disturbed among us, the narcissistic, the conscienceless, among us. I think they're reflected in our tales of vampires and succubi and the unquiet dead. I think you can reasonably read a lot of these myths to be reflections of the types of disturbed personalities that are part of human nature and that have always been with us and that are with us now to, I think, a higher degree than they have been before.
Ever, like, that we at least know about. It seems like it's epidemic levels, worse than that even. Like, I don't even, and I also have the personal opinion that this is intentionally crafted and created and drawn out of people by all of the systems that are around them too. The education system, which I was long a part of, and our media and everything else. But to get back to what you were saying, do you feel like our modern, what's replacing fairy tales for children, like our modern stories for children, are lacking in that? It's not as much that, it's more...
Oh, they're not only lacking in it, they're anti it.
Yeah.
Our current narratives are actually teaching children to let down their guard, to identify actual villains as saviors and grandmothers and loving fathers. It is a brainwashing, whether it's conscious or not, whether the people who are participating in the creation have all conspired, I don't care about that. I'm not saying that it must necessarily be conscious. I'm merely describing what I think it is.
Right.
And what it is teaching children not to have boundaries, teaching children to trust candy-colored cottages. I mean, I have terms for this. I mean, a lot of what you see in social media and in programming that's made for children is something I call candy cottaging, from Hansel and Gretel. There's a reason why the witch made her house of gingerbread and windows of spun sugar, because it is attractive to children, and she wanted to get them in there and fatten them up. And that is the reason why you see people who want to educate children about their gender identity wearing sparkly colors and sometimes even unicorn horns with lots of curly-Q fonts and ice cream and all this stuff. They're candy cottaging. They're teaching children to be victims.
Isn't that amazing? It's almost like we're being tested now on what we were being taught as kids, and we're failing drastically, and then we're teaching our failures to the kids.
We're completely failing. Yeah.
I just saw someone on Twitter today said, why is talking about any level of sexuality or sex in the workplace sexual harassment, but talking about it with 3 and 4-year-olds is just, education. I was like, that's a really good point. Why is this the exception to the rule?
Yeah, because we're living in a hypocritical system. Our values are hypocritical. Our values are narcissistic. Our values are pathological. We have glorified. Our culture glorifies. I'm not sure where you want to go, but I know that I think it might be helpful if I introduce people to what I mean when I talk about the personality disorders, because
I would love that. Yeah,
they might be unfamiliar to some people.
Yes.
So what I'm talking about are called personality disorders. People often think, oh, he's talking about mental illness. Yes and no. And the no is very important. I'm not talking about what I think of as the sympathetic mental illnesses, the ones where a person is actually disconnected from reality and therefore, for example, cannot be held legally liable in court because they literally had a psychotic break or they're an untreated schizophrenic. I'm not talking about people who have severe anxiety. I'm not even talking about people with major depressive disorder. Or I'm not talking about bipolar either. I'm not talking about manic depression. And when I say the sympathetic mental illnesses, what I mean by that is we tend to react to these emotionally. Our first reflexive emotion is how sad for that person. They need help, right?
Right.
That is not what your reaction should be to personality disorders. Personality disorder, another term for them, are character disorders. It means what it says. Yes, I'm talking about people whose very personality, the core of who they are, is profoundly disordered. Yeah. Often, not always, but often immoral, wicked. What are cluster B personality disorders? There are allegedly 4 of them, although I think that people who fit into this category usually have some of each. I don't think they're discrete. Yeah. But they are borderline personality disorder. That's the emotionally unstable one. You can remember it by I hate you, don't leave me. Narcissistic personality disorder, which is self-explanatory. It's not mere vaingloriousness. It's not even an especially vain person. It's on a much higher level, and it can be camouflaged and disguised. It is not always flashy. Histrionic personality disorder, the over-emoting, the extraordinary and extreme emotional reactions that can flip on a dime and that don't seem genuine and that are often used in a sexually provocative way as a seduction technique. And antisocial personality disorder, which is known to you colloquially as psychopathy. Mm. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and it's a really good distinction because we do have, sympathy for these other categories of people with these other mental illnesses. But when it comes to the ones you're describing with cluster B specifically, if you have sympathy for them, they will use it against you and destroy you.
Yes.
So it's a really good distinction because you have to be careful. And just like the fairy tales told us, don't go in the candy-colored house, actually. Try to see it for what it is.
Yeah, and I'll qualify this a little. This is not going to save me. What I'm about to say is not going to save me from the comments that come in. It's not going to save me from the accusations that I'm a horrible person, but I'm going to do it anyway. You can have empathy for people with personality disorders. Empathy is not sympathy. They are different. You can have empathy. You can try to understand from their point of view why they feel and act the way they do. You can look at their past. Most people with severe personality disorders were abused or neglected as children. This tends to get passed down in families. There seems to be a small number of people who are born that way, but it does seem overall that it's largely connected to traumatic childhoods. My mother being an example. I mean, my mother, if you want to know, and that's what started my whole show, was my awakening to the reality of who my mother was. I spent my entire life thinking that my mother was crazy in this very particular way that only Josh's mom is, and that no one else would ever understand it, and no one would believe me if I told them. And then I learned what cluster B personality disorders were. And my mother is one way of describing it is a full-blown combination of both borderline and narcissistic personality disorders. Yikes. What does that mean? What does that look like? Who does that look like? Might be a little generational divide here. I say this, and it's funny. It is a little bit funny, but I mean it seriously. I'm not doing it just for a joke. I do mean this. If you want to know what a person like my mother is like, she is a cross between a poor trailer court version of Joan Crawford, the famous actress, Mommy Dearest, child abuser, and the fanatical, abusive mother, Margaret White, from the movie Carrie, the horror movie. It's a cross between these two people. Not everybody is exactly like that, but this is a known and familiar character to a lot of people. For the most part, most people with cluster B personality disorders are not going to recover from them. Those with borderline personality disorder are somewhat treatable, and some of them will make a recovery. It is not the majority. And what I say to people is, because my concern is for the people who are victimized by this, and that can be children, it can be spouses, intimate partners. Today, I think it's all of us, because I think cluster B personality traits have been culturally validated, and they are ruining our discourse. I think wokeness, what we call wokeness, all of it is cluster B. Yeah. That's what it is. That's the root. It's cluster B.
That's what I love most about your show, and what you do is making that connection and pointing it out over and over and over again, so people can start to see, like, this is at the core of our social milieu right now, and it's disgusting.
Right.
And there's a way to protect yourself from it and not go in the candy-coated house, right? And like you said, you can have this empathy, right? And for the people in my life who I've found are similar and have similar diagnoses, I've been able to say, like, oh, well, I'm finally free then, because I will never, ever give you anything from me except just love and really, really fucking good boundaries. Like, goodbye. I'm still over here, and, technically, and I'll send you all the love I can send you, and then otherwise, like, mostly just keep you away.
Yeah. And my approach is somewhat different from yours. We have different circumstances, but I won't give the love.
Yeah.
And I actually say to people, I want you to second guess yourself. Everybody has to figure out how to negotiate relationships with these people on their own terms, and There are circumstances where, for example, if a parent, there are cases where good parents who are not abusive do end up with a personality disordered child,
Yeah.
sadly. I'm not asking those parents not to love that child, right?
Right.
I understand things like this, right? But overall, these people are dangerous, okay? And they don't actually love you, most of them, because most of them are not capable of love. That is part of their psychiatric disturbance. They may believe that they love you, but it's not love. And, I spent 41 years catering to such a person in my mother, cleaning up her messes, spending my money to keep her from being homeless. I ended up buying a house for her,
Wow.
right?
Yeah.
I was the dutiful son, and I took it and took it and took it until I finally woke up. I spent my entire life trying to love my mother to some semblance of health, and you cannot do it. You can't do it. You're not going to change the cluster B in your life. In most cases, it's not going to happen. So my concern and my sympathies are not with the people with cluster B. I know some people who have borderline personality disorder who are the unusual types who take responsibility for it, understand that they have a problem, and are decent people. They exist. There's not many of them, though.
Yeah.
Most of them are not decent people.
How freeing to be told as well to anybody out there who is dealing with this and either just starting to realize it or, or not, that you don't have to love them back. You can actually just save yourself and just go. Like, that's okay.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to. If I had not estranged myself from my mother, and I had to do it through the court system, I had to evict her from a house. This was never a position I wanted to be in. Never. But I had to do it, and I had to cut contact completely and cold and dead, and I did. And it saved my life. And I'm not saying that to be hyperbolic. I was drinking myself to death. And at the end, when the conflict that she had engendered became so severe, I contemplated suicide for the first time in my adult life. And I knew that this had to stop. Some people will recognize this. They will have been through something like that. Fortunately, many people will not have had as severe an experience. But I think that if you are a person who knows or suspects that you have such a person in your life that you're intimately involved with, please keep open the possibility, even if you don't think you can do it right now, make the idea of going completely no contact something that you are allowed to contemplate. Make it a possibility that you're allowed to ponder, because you may need to turn to it.
I love that. It's such a powerful thing to share with people who are suffering too, because I think some people don't understand, and going back to the sympathy thing, how damaging it can be for the person who is on the receiving end of any of these disorders, and how far it can drive them into their own pain and agony. But people want to instead have sympathy for the narcissist or sympathy for the borderline personality. They're like, well, they have mental illness and like poor them, they can't help it. And it's like, yeah, but you could argue the same thing of a pedophile. I don't care. I have no sympathy for you. Like, I'm sorry, you're broken.
Well, I mean, I'll put it in very stark terms. This is going to piss a couple people off, but it shouldn't, because when you think about it, it's absolutely accurate. You can't deny it. Jeffrey Dahmer, okay, psychopath.
Yeah.
I don't think that's controversial for anybody. We all accept that, right? Psychopathy is a cluster B personality disorder. Jeffrey Dahmer may have been abused himself. Can he not help it? Shouldn't we feel bad for him? He doesn't mean to be accountable, but he has a mental illness. I mean, I'm being a little glib here, but seriously,
it's the same argument.
It's argument, it's an extreme argument, but that delineates the stakes of what we've got here. And no, I'm not saying everybody who has a cluster B personality disorder is Jeffrey Dahmer. I am not saying that. But if you can understand, if you say, well, of course, why would I feel sympathy for him? Then you can begin to understand why it can be morally acceptable not to feel sympathy for people who abuse on a lower level that is nonetheless severe and damaging.
Yeah, It's such a good point. You know, this is part of what I love about your show and what you do as well, is you're, whether you know it or not, very well steeped in logical fallacy and logic in general. And many people are not. So you can point things out like that, like, no, I'm not making this argument, this is not what I'm saying, because you know the people are going to come with the logical fallacies to attack you with them, and you already
I've
see
heard
it coming.
all of them.
Yeah.
You know, I learned them all from my mother, and this is something that's helpful for people as well. Part of growing up, and even after growing up, I lived with this mental. I mean, I have plenty of my own mental problems as a result of this. You know, I mean, I'm still in therapy, and I'm not a perfect person either. I have some of the traits that my mother has. You know, it's very hard to get out of a household like that without developing some of them. But if, and I completely lost my train of thought. I hate it when I do that.
It was about logical fallacies and...
Logical fallacies, thank you. To grow up in a cluster B household is to grow up in a world without logic. It is a world where cause and effect no longer work.
Yeah.
Where there's no such thing as truth. The only thing that is true is what the abusive person says is true in the moment.
Yeah.
Whatever they need to say in the moment in order to control you or instill fear in you or instill doubt in you, they will say it. And if they literally contradict themselves 180 degrees tomorrow, that is the truth then. It is a confusing world. For a child, it is impossible to negotiate. It is impossibly confusing. I pay attention to logic and cause and effect, and I'm very specific to the point of being pedantic sometimes in order to be crystal clear in what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. Because that is what you need to get back. You need to get your sense of sanity and stability back. You need to be able to relearn how to recognize truth from lies, and to understand when you are being emotionally manipulated. Logic matters. Logic and sense and rationality are absent from the cluster B mind, and they are absent from the cluster B household. That is something that is taken from us when we are abused this way. We need it back.
It's so fascinating to me because I was a teacher for 14 years, and one of the last 2 or 3 years or something I was teaching, I went to, a professional development, and they're so dumb, but you have to go. So I'm there, and they ask the whole room of teachers if there was one thing that you could make sure your students knew by the time they left, what would it be? And I said, logic and how to think. And the whole room laughed. So, and
whole room full of women teachers, wasn't it?
Yes. But also, it took me a while because I was like, what just happened? Like, what was funny about that? Because I'm often doing this. I'm like, not humaning well or something. And then I realized, I think, that they thought that it was so obvious that kids would have logic and know how to think. And I was like, oh, have you ever tried to teach them logic and how to think? No, they don't. I spent years teaching this to my juniors and seniors because I was like, you guys need this like bad. So please, let's delve into this. And it was actually really fun. But they thought that was just already just automatic because they didn't have logic or they didn't know how to think. Isn't that crazy? So yeah, I really appreciate this. I do see it as this tool that is desperately needed by all people, especially because of exactly what you're describing. That's the best reason to have it, is to avoid these narcissistic, psychopathic, cluster B people who are everywhere.
And we have collectively forgotten this, and we've been trained to forget this by forces in our society. Yeah. Okay? Politicians, public health, the media, have a vested interest in breaking our ability to make logical deductions. This is deliberate. Yeah. It's not always front brain conscious with every one of the cogs who's part of that, but this is deliberate.
Yes.
We do not know the difference anymore between emoting and thinking.
Yes.
Notice, and you hear it, there are tells in our language and in our vernacular. People don't say, I think X anymore, do they? They say, I feel X. Well, I feel that this is wrong. I feel that you're saying this. That's new.
Because your feelings can't be wrong, right? Well, it's just how I
no
feel.
feelings are wrong.
Yeah.
But the problem is that we actually have blurred the line. We do not understand the difference between experiencing an emotion and having a rational thought.
Yeah.
Most of what we are doing when we think we're thinking about things is we are emoting about them. We are feeling about them. And because we have been trained that our feelings are the most important, and the worst thing that can be done to us is to have our feelings invalidated, then we have a social cudgel that we can use to beat people who oppress us with logic, right? My truth, well, this is my truth. No, it isn't. It's your opinion. It's your emotion. It's not your truth because you don't have a truth. I don't have a truth. There is no such thing as your truth or my truth. There is the truth. We may or may not be able to discern the truth, but there is an objective truth that lives in the world independent of how we feel about it. And we have forgotten this.
Yeah, I just watched this thing with Project Veritas, and there was some guy on a college campus, I forget which college, and someone comes up to debate him. It's kind of like the Steven Crowder, like, change my mind thing. And the kid who's arguing against Project Veritas just emotes. He just freaks out. He just loses it. He just attacks over and over and over again.
Yep.
And he walks away thinking he won. And so it's not just that they can only emote. It's like they think that the emoting, the louder you can emote, that's how you won. Now you've won the argument. Like, this is insanity. That's where we're at. That's a college student.
And it's common. I mean, I'm sure you have, Lindsay, years of stories from your years of teaching school.
It's
you
terrifying.
Could probably talk about this forever and never run out of them.
That's true.
What that person that you're describing was doing, these are psychological defenses, right? That we erect to protect our ego. We all do it. This is part of human nature. All of us have psychological defenses. But when maladaptive defenses like that, the histrionics, the refusal to actually walk through step 1 to step 2 and agree, like, they won't even agree on common language. They literally will not define words. When you ask them to define words, they won't do it.
I'm not a biologist.
Right. This is a defense to cover up fear and insecurity. This is one of the paradoxes of ego. When we say ego, most people hear ego, they believe that it is a synonym for grandiosity and boastfulness. It is not. We often describe people that I would call narcissistic. We might popularly describe them as egotistical, but that can mislead us because that egotistical behavior actually betrays a profound lack of ego strength.
That's a great
genuine ego strength, sense of who you are, an ability to understand that you are able to be wrong and you are able to be right, that your emotions come and go, and that if you disagree with somebody, it doesn't mean that you're worthless. Or if they disagree with you, it doesn't mean you're worthless. We don't have very good ego strength anymore because of the way we've raised our children. All of the histrionics, all of the screaming, all of the claims that people are oppressing or abusing you or invalidating you, it's covering up a lack and a wound, right? So here's where empathy comes in. This is empathy as an understanding why a person acts this way. It's not acceptable, it's not helpful, and it's something they should grow out of, but there are reasons why they do it. That's one of the big ones.
Yeah, that's so helpful. When you're talking about histrionic, it just reminded me that and I totally don't care about this, but I just, for some reason, know that in the Johnny Depp case with his girlfriend, Amber, or whatever, she just got diagnosed or something, or I don't know. They announced in course that she has histrionic personality.
I believe it was a reference to both borderline and histrionic personality disorders.
She's just like she just does not have.
But
a reaction.
I'm glad that came out. I'm glad that came out because I mean, to me, it's obvious. I mean, and any of you who are watching or listening right now, any of you can learn to detect these people. In fact, many of you already know how to do it.
In fact, that's why you should listen to Josh's podcast, Disaffected, as much as possible.
Thank you. we've all dealt with a person like that in our lives. Not everybody is Amber Heard, but we have all had the grandiose, self-aggrandizing pastor in church, or the queen bee who runs the bake club or the nonprofit organization and does the kids' bike drive at Christmas, or the meddling father or the meddling mother-in-law, the person who affects a sweet demeanor and says, I'm only doing this because I care about you. Oh, I'm so wounded that you didn't take my advice, all the way up to, just a flat out psycho bitch like Amber Heard, right? It's not hard. This stuff is not abstruse. And I'm sorry, I'm not a licensed mental health professional. I have no desire to be one. I'm not representing myself as one. But I can see cluster B just as well, and frankly, better than a lot of working professionals, because they have been trained in bullshit.
Yeah.
That has nothing to do with the real world. Any person of ordinary sense can see this. When you detect a person with this kind of disturbed character, stay away from them to the greatest extent you can.
For real. And then I when I point out to other people, I'm like, oh, by the way, that person who you just met, like that, I've interacted with them, and they seem to me to literally be narcissists. And people are like, oh,
Yep.
It'll be fine. I'm like, okay, have fun.
Nope.
Like, it's not going to be
Yeah.
fine, but have fun. And that a lot of these people, I've noticed, they're learning that other people are learning to discern what they are. And so there's this
Do you think they are?
I don't know. I just had this person who definitely is narcissistic tell me before. I never said to them that I thought they were narcissists at all, and they said to me, oh, people who diagnose other people as narcissistic and whatever, they're usually narcissists themselves. And I'm like, I don't think that's true. I think you said that in case someone ever says, I think you might be a narcissist, right?
Lindsay, you're exactly right.
Okay, thank you. I was like, I'm pretty
You're
sure
exactly
that's what's
right.
happening here.
It's true. All of us are capable of projecting.
Yes,
Right?
right.
We're all capable of blaming and seeing in other people the things that deep down we know are wrong with us. That is a thing that humans do. Narcissists and cluster Bs, however, are masters and mistresses of projection. They are the absolute pros. They're licensed in it. They're regulated by the state board. Right? And yes, the second episode of my show, I addressed this topic. The title of the show is "Don't Diagnose," which is a fairly common pushback that people like me get. You're not a mental health professional. You don't know what you're talking about. You can't diagnose them. You're stigmatizing them. Here's my answer to that. And I think this is also useful for it's. I'm not just justifying myself. I'm trying to offer something to people who are watching this. Diagnosis. First of all, we need to define the term diagnosis. Okay, so diagnosis, formal diagnosis, is when a medical or psychiatric professional sees a person in a professional setting, makes a professional evaluation, makes a diagnosis, and enters that diagnosis into the person's chart. That diagnosis is going to have an effect on the kinds of services that they receive. It may affect the course of their medical or psychiatric care. This is what doctors do. It's what psychiatrists do. It's what some levels of other mental health professionals with diagnostic capability do. I can say the exact same things that any pro would, but I'm not actually diagnosing, because I do not have the power to enter my thoughts into your medical chart. I am not stigmatizing you. Borderlines pull this bullshit all the time. Borderlines are the absolute queens of self-pitying, self-victimizing bullshit. They say, you're stigmatizing us, and people just call women borderline because they're misogynist, and they don't like women who have their own opinions, and it's just really terrible. Piss off.
Yeah.
That's an act. That is an act. That's not genuine. It's an act. I'm not stigmatizing you. Your behavior is stigmatizing you. And the extent to which your behavior is stigmatized is appropriate. You should be ashamed of your behavior. You should feel bad about it. You should expect people not to tolerate it, and you should expect them to describe it in negative terms.
Yes.
Sorry. Sometimes stigma is warranted.
Agreed.
So I can't diagnose people, but there is no moral rule and no legal rule that says lay people aren't allowed to notice things and say things.
Yeah.
Nobody ever says, if a woman comes out of an abusive relationship where she's physically battered and coercively controlled by her husband, say she becomes an advocate to help other women. Maybe she opens a shelter. Maybe she begins working for a shelter. She does educational workshops, and she says, I had the classic abusive husband, the classic battering husband. Nobody says, don't diagnose him. How can you diagnose him as an abuser? Are you a professional?
You're stigmatizing
Nobody
him.
says that because it's fucking stupid.
Yes.
Right? It's just as stupid when, the cluster B is the classic abuser. That is the psychological profile of the abuser. We are all capable of being abusive situationally. I have, you have. Unfortunately, we have all been abusive to people at some point or another. Absolutely. It's part of our human failing. This is on a different level.
Yeah.
If you accept that there is a category of person that you recognize as this is an abuser, 9 times out of 10 or more, you just identified a cluster B. There's nothing that says you can't know this, right? You're not overstepping your bounds. So don't let professionals, and especially the cottage industry, frankly, of younger white women who are getting into clinical social work and the lightest possible kind of mental health counseling, are creating a cottage industry of apologia for borderline personality disorder. They're apologizing for it. You're victims, you're misunderstood, you just feel more than other people, and people stigmatize you all over the place. They're not offering therapy, they're offering coddling and validation that further calcifies maladaptive traits that are hurting that person herself and also causing her to hurt and mistreat other people around her. That is why I take this hard stand and say, speak up, notice things, don't tell yourself that you're not allowed to notice them, and for God's sake, stop apologizing for correctly pointing out abusive behavior that fits a certain psychological pattern.
Yes. And who does this serve, right? In addition to the people who are diagnosed openly, most of our politicians, most of the people who are like running social media and other things, and all of those people are also served by us not feeling like we are allowed to describe reality because we're not professionals, including in the past 2.5 years of bullshit that we've all been enduring. We're not allowed to
Are you
describe...
a doctor?
Yeah.
Are you an epidemiologist?
Yeah.
No, but I can read a study and I can do arithmetic.
And I can read the box that says, these masks do not prevent transmission of COVID-19. I know how to read. Isn't that weird?
Yeah. No, I'm so glad you said that, Lindsay, because that's exactly the point. Of course they would say that, wouldn't they? Of course the narcissist doesn't want you to be able to detect it. Of course it is in his interest to try to foment a cultural value that says you are a bad person if you say those things. Duh.
And then you get in a car with Jeffrey Dahmer or something because you're like, he just must be a really nice guy. I don't trust any of my instincts or any of the things I
or you vote
through.
for somebody like Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
Which unfortunately I did when I was still I'm a former wokie.
I was going to ask you because I am too, and I wanted to ask you, like, is that a result of our experience with these people, or is that just a byproduct of growing up? Like, why were we so... both of us had this experience where we went into that world and really believed it and then like reformed and we're like, wait, what? Wow.
Well, let me ask you this. And you and I don't know each other. This is the first time we've talked. So, anything you don't, want to talk about, obviously I'll respect that. But do you have family experience of this kind of psychological abuse, this kind of cluster B structure? Is that something you're familiar with?
Absolutely.
Okay. So I think, for me, and I suspect a lot of this may be true for you and for other people like us, I now believe that, the reason I became involved in social justice, well, I'm also gay, which was, and I was involved in actual gay rights politicking during the early 90s. when we really still did have legal rights to win before all this queer stuff made everyone crazy. So my mother was a Democrat and a liberal, and all of our family were, and I remember how difficult it was to be a young gay kid in those days. And I got a chip on my shoulder as a result of it. And I think all of that steered me into emotionally identifying with this social justice warrior mindset that says that every interaction with other people is a power game, and that everyone is trying to hurt you and everyone is trying to oppress you, and you have to be a warrior every single moment, and everyone is an enemy. Yeah, I think our childhood experiences soften us up for that, because also the big thing about the cluster B dynamic, these people see themselves as victims, and when you are raised by one of them, you begin to see yourself as a victim too, in a perverse and distorted way. I could not, 10 years ago, if anyone had suggested, well, and they did, there were friends of mine who looked me directly in the eye and said, your mother is exploiting you and taking advantage of you. And I reacted with fury and said, no, she isn't. How dare you? My mother. I literally said my mother is a saint. Okay? Because I could not, it was too emotionally painful for me to accept the real person that my mother was. I displaced it onto every other target. Everyone was a homophobe. Everyone hated poor people. All Republicans wanted homeless people to die. Mm-hmm. Right? That's the extreme version of it.
That's what I thought too.
So that's what it was like for me. I don't know if that reflects what it, how you think you got where you got.
Yeah, and I became a revolutionary communist and fought in the street for communism.
All right.
I went real far. And then I was cured of that suddenly when I realized they literally wanted to put anyone with any kind of spiritual awareness into camps for re-education. Not just religious people, but anybody who believed they had a soul, for example. And I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. I'm a very spiritual person. I believe I have a soul at the least. And the rest is a mystery to me. And I like to figure it out as I go. You're going to put me in a camp. And they're like, oh yeah, that'd be a re-education quick. I'm like, this is insane. But I look back finally after years of healing, and I see that every single person in the revolutionary communist movement that I was a part of was drastically sick or, unwell mentally in many ways, and also this maximized victimization. Everything was someone else's fault and was why we had to fight to rip down the system and force our new system on everyone. Whew. And I just am like, this is amazing.
Tear it all down.
Yeah, bring in all the sick people you can. Let's all get together and fight anyone. Whew. I'm just so glad I left and got out of there. Our connection is very unstable, it seems. So I don't know if I'm even hearing or seeing you in the current moment.
I think we're having a little bit of internet delay here.
I don't know how I don't know how suppressed you think you are, but I think you're very suppressed, and this might be one of the ways.
What do you mean?
Well, I know you got kicked off Twitter. I know that your show, especially on YouTube, should be much more popular than it seems. You have a good amount of subscribers, but you should have many more. And I just feel like you are, algorithmically put to the side when you should be organically allowed to shine.
I do strongly suspect that it's gamed, and that our show, Kevin, the producer, my friend, and I, it's our show. Yes, I do think they're being algorithmically toyed with. I can't prove that, but that's the whole point of it. We're living in Kafka.
Yeah.
Right? Living in a world of information asymmetry. It's exactly a Franz Kafka novel. You can't know for sure. And they mean that. They want that instability. The uncertainty and the inability to discern is their goal.
And on all fronts, not just what we're talking about here with specifically cluster B and narcissists and psychopaths, but everything. Yeah. Everything should be so confusing that you can't figure out what's going on, so you can't trust yourself. But you can trust the state and the good, friendly corporations. So one
and
other
the science.
Oh yes, you can trust.
Don't forget the science.
Especially in the embodied form of Tiny Fauci. Can trust him as science.
Tiny Fauci.
I
I call him a jumped up garden gnome.
Yes, I love it. Well, I always say I don't always say, I've said many times, the least important thing about a person is what kind of genitalia they have and who they're having sex with. Unless it's like a child or like.
Unless you're having sex and then the genitals count.
Yes, and then you want to know before you do that, usually. Not everyone, though. But that's usually what I say, right? But in your case, it's actually very important to me, and maybe to many people, and that you are gay, because it's like we used to say when I was playing the victim game, white men need to speak to other white men about racism, and men need to speak to other men about abusing their wives, because it's coming from an equal ground, and that has some power to it, and you can't dismiss it as easily.
Yep.
And you are speaking to this whole trans craziness, which you and I and anyone listening, for the most part, we don't care who's trans and who isn't. Like, that's not a problem for us, but what's happening is a problem for us. And you speak to that, and you're one of the only people who I know who can speak to it without just being instantly dismissed as an absolute piece of trash. And I love that. So thank you for being someone who can speak to that.
I'm not sure that that's true. I mean, I think some people can hear what we say. Some people can hear what you say. Some people can hear what I say. There are a lot of people who can't and won't hear what we say.
That's true.
That's fine. I think that what people like you and I should be able to expect is simply not to be interfered with.
Yeah.
Not to be algorithmically suppressed, not to be kicked off Twitter for with accusations of inciting violence and harassment, which is what happened to me. And of course, obviously, I did no such thing.
No.
I'm not trying to win over any narcissists. I hope to. Here's the thing. Here's another concept for people to think about: the term flying monkeys. Okay? If you're not familiar with that term, it's from the movie The Wizard of Oz. You remember that the Wicked Witch had an army of winged monkeys, and she sent them out to poison the travelers. She sent them out to do the dirty work. Narcissists have flying monkeys. I was a flying monkey for my mother for a long time. I've been a flying monkey for other people. Many of us are flying monkeys at one point, and we don't know it. We may think our best friend is totally right and everybody's out to get him, and his boss is always a bastard, and this, that, and the other thing. Sometimes we wise up. I am trying to win over some flying monkeys. And I'm trying to win over bystanders who are silent. But I'm not trying to convince the narcissists, and I'm not trying to convince their most ardent defenders. I don't give a shit about these people. I give a shit about them to the extent that they are a threat, and I want to see them contained so that they are not threatening to other people. That's all I care about. I don't care if they like me or not. Us, normal people, for lack of a better word, the non-personality disordered, we are 50% of the problem. It is entirely 100% our responsibility to do something about it. We are the only ones who can save us. Our abuser will not save us, right? By definition, that's why they're an abuser. You are the only one who can rescue yourself from an abusive marriage. You are the only one who can extricate yourself from an abusive parent-child relationship. You are the only one who can quit your job if your boss is a psychopath. Nobody else can help you. Period. It's unfair. Sometimes it makes me gnash my teeth and actually cry into my pillow at how unfair it is. But it is unfair, and it's true. We have to take responsibility for this. If we don't, they will eat us.
Yeah. Well, that's what I love too. You've empowered so many people to be able to look around them and say, oh, this is what's happening. And then here's what I can do about it, actually. And even when you're saying, like, I'm not going to apologize for them, I'm not sympathetic to them, like, nope. All these things are empowering for people to say, like, okay, well, yeah, I don't have to be either. I don't have to put up with your shit. I don't have to be sad for you because you have a mental illness or whatever's going on with you. I just don't have to be around you or interact with you, actually. So goodbye.
Right.
And that's just very powerful. And there's so many people who don't have that outlook otherwise. So, I love that you're freeing the world in this way. It's very important.
Well, I mean, I hope, it's not like I'm a household name or anything, but, I do speak to people. I get a lot of gratification from what people tell me after watching and listening to the show. I've had countless people tell me, I'm not saying this to be self-aggrandizing, I'm saying it because I think it's real, and it can help you to learn about these things. People tell me all the time, you changed my perspective entirely. You made my life make sense for me for the first time.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And I know that because it happened to me.
Yeah.
My sister picked up the phone one day when I had my mother living in my house, and I'm not going to go into all the gory details. If anybody's interested about that, I tell the stories, and I think in a fairly amusing way on the show. You can, if you want to hear all about my crazy mother, just watch my show. But the lead up to the conflict and the final blow up was so painful and so extraordinary. I mean, I was popping Klonopin. I couldn't eat anything. I was losing weight. It was horrible. And my sister picked up the phone one day because we were trying to figure out if our mother was getting Alzheimer's because she wasn't making sense. She was talking about things that actually happened, and she was making up stories about things that never occurred. I was there. I saw nothing happened. Is she going crazy? Well, that was my defense mechanism. That was me protecting myself from what I really knew, which is this is the same woman I have known my entire life. She has always been this woman. She's not getting into Alzheimer's. This is who she is. My sister said to me, Josh, I think I know what's wrong with our mother. I think our mother has a personality disorder. I think she's a narcissist. I had no idea what personality disorders were. I didn't know what narcissism was in a cool way, but that woke me up, and I did the reading. That changed my life. It changed my entire perspective. So this can happen for you too. If you're stuck in a situation like this, you're not actually stuck, I promise.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. That's what I love. You're actually changing lives, and it's just so important, and I just appreciate it, and so many people do. And like I said, who knows what your actual numbers are or would be, because we don't get to know. I mean, I've literally had things tell me like, nobody watched your live stream today, and I'm like, there was a ton of comments. So clearly, like, the numbers are messed with, don't always get reported right. People are unsubbed, like all of that stuff. So you've probably reached far more people than you even know, which is also important for you to know, I think. I like when you talk about too, and because I've never heard anyone else say this about going back to the gay movement, back in the day, and that you said, you guys were actually wrong for forcing the change in the definition of the word marriage. And I would have never even thought about that. And you brought that up. And do you want to share it with people about that?
I'm laughing because if the version of me that existed 10 years ago could see the version of me today, he would hate me and probably try to kill me.
Yeah, I relate.
Because I've become everything that I thought I would never. I'm gay, but guess what? I'm a cultural conservative. I'm not a liberal anymore.
Yeah.
I'm a prude. I disapprove of the way most gay men live their lives because I lived my life that way. Everything I talk about, the dangers, the mental dangers, the physical dangers, the developmental dangers of especially early and excessive promiscuity that is common in gay male culture, the drug taking. We are a sick population. Gay men are a very mentally troubled population. The rates of alcoholism, diagnosed mental illness, and in fact, Class B personality disorders are far higher among gay people than they are with straight people. That's a fact. It's a fact that nobody likes, and they will say it's not a fact, but it is a fact. And there's also an extraordinarily high correlation between being gay and coming from an abusive home. That's something people also absolutely hate, but it is true.
You're not supposed to talk about that.
No, I'm not supposed to talk about any of this. So when it comes to the gay marriage stuff, I still, I believe in equality before the law, and it was an injustice that homosexuals could not arrange their financial and domestic and healthcare decisions and lives in a way that was available to straight people. I mean, I remember the days when older gay male couples who I was friends with when one of them would get sick and go to the hospital would literally not allow their partner to come in because the goddamn family, who didn't speak to that man for 20 years because he was a nasty sodomite sinner, had the legal authority to do so.
Ugh.
I have seen people literally steal the corpse away from the partner of 30 years.
That's awful.
Simply to spite him for being a faggot. That needed to change. We needed the same legal rights to make funeral, healthcare, financial, and homemaking decisions that straight people had. Our mistake, however, was we wanted more, and I wanted more. What did we want that was more? We wanted to change the way people felt about us. We didn't just want to be tolerated, we wanted to be accepted. And then when we were accepted, we wanted more. We wanted to be affirmed. We wanted to be validated. We wanted Catholics to tell us that what we were doing wasn't a sin. And we wanted to force people to bake a cake for cutting somebody's tits off. You know, it's just, talk about narcissism. That was a big mistake. Human beings cannot make other human beings like or approve of them. That's not something we can do, and it is not a reasonable ask. We should have been, and I regret this because I was part of this. I regret a lot of my actions. We should have been satisfied with civil unions. It gave us the same legal rights as everybody else had, and it didn't get under anybody's skin, and it didn't make religious people feel like we were telling them that they had to change their theology. Yeah. They were right to be upset about that. We went too far.
I appreciate that, because it especially comes back today now when we have all kinds of compelled language asks and definition changes. And that is a slippery slope we're on. Like, it is not okay. I don't know of a single case where forcing someone to speak in a certain way or changing the definition of something is helpful or necessary. It's very Orwellian. It's very mind controlling and doublespeak and all of it's like you said before, it's intentional. It's meant to confuse. It's meant to remove meaning. You know, you can no longer use these ideas anymore. You can no longer be sure of what if they're going to be the same next week as they are today. And it's insanity inducing.
It is literally crazy making.
Yeah.
And that's the point of it. And that's the thesis. That's my thesis. The reason I talk as candidly and in as much detail as I have talked about on my show about the abusive home that I grew up in is because my thesis is that abusive home, that psychology has gone feral. It's no longer domestic. It's jumped into the public sphere. We are all living in my mother's house now in America. I'm not saying that it's like that. People misunderstand this a lot. I'm not making a metaphorical claim. I am making a literal claim. We are in an extended and scaled up version of the abusive home with the same psychology.
Yeah.
And to connect some other things, we can use different terminology, but the psychology that I call cluster B and that I'm talking about is the same psychology that's cult psychology. Okay? It's communist psychology.
Yeah.
It's Marxist psychology. It's domestic abuse psychology. It is all the same thing.
That's a really good point.
So when people, oh my gosh, that's so weird. Why does it sound like it's like a cult? It's not like a cult. It's the same thing. A cult is one expression of cluster B domination.
Wow, it's such a good point. It's so interesting because I've done shows on cult, psychology. I've done shows on groupthink psychology. I've done shows on cluster B and narcissism and psychopathy, and I have never made that connection. But one of the things that's coming to me right now as you're saying that is this initial, whatever you want to call it, the love bomb thing, right?
Yeah.
A lot of like narcissists and cluster B, you're like, this person's amazing. Like, I love them. Right?
Yes.
They're like so good at that. And then the next, however long it takes them to get there, suddenly they're like bashing you into the ground. You're like, well, I thought you were my best friend. You were the coolest person I had ever met. And now this, like, it's so confusing. We're seeing this on a mass scale now.
The thing about, it's not everybody, but it's very common. Many times, okay, well, let's, like you, Lindsay, I don't really give a shit about these people, but since it's in the news, let's use the example of Johnny Depp and Amber Heard.
Yeah.
Okay. What you've got here is an abusive relationship. I don't know an awful lot about the backgrounds of either of those people. I know that Johnny Depp also has his problems. He also came from an abusive household. What I see here is I see him in the codependent, vulnerable, fawning, controlled victim state. He may have other problems too that may be diagnosable. But Amber is definitely the major abuser in that dynamic. It's a classic dynamic. The more powerful narcissist goes after the vulnerable codependent or the vulnerable borderline. Borderlines are very attracted to narcissists and psychopaths and are very vulnerable to being abused by them. So, you know, this kind of coercive control, this constant gaslighting, making up episodes of abuse that she claims he did to her that just don't add up and don't make sense. This is very classic. But look at Amber Heard. She's beautiful, right? A lot of cluster Bs are very seductive. They're sexually seductive. They're intellectually seductive. They're charismatic.
Yeah.
I think that's what magic is. I'm not a believer. I don't actually believe. Who knows where I'll end up? Yeah. Maybe I'll change my mind. I don't believe in the supernatural. I don't believe in an embodied entity called God, and I don't believe in magical powers. Yeah. But I do believe in magic, and magic is words and charisma. They cast a spell on us. Some of the most seductive, attractive people you're ever going to meet are fully personality disordered. And I'm sorry to tell you, some of the best sex you're ever going to have in your life is going to be with a cluster B.
Now people are going to be like, which should I choose?
My recommendation is, if you're going to stick your toe in the danger waters, make sure it's only for one night.
And protect yourself very heavily.
Yes, in all ways.
Right.
They're very seductive, and it's easy to fall for them. But those of us who come from abusive households are especially vulnerable. I have been especially vulnerable to falling for. I mean, I tell my women friends, I will vet your date for you, and I will tell you the danger. Put this man in front of me. If I find him hot, run, because it means he's a narcissist or a sociopath.
I love it. Like, this is my measure.
Yeah. Super hot narcissist.
Yeah, we have this because it's a pattern that we've built up, and so it makes sense that we find the same people over and over again. It's very easy. I was definitely in the codependent role a lot, and like you said, I've also been the abuser in many ways too that I regret and hopefully won't repeat.
Yes.
But this is interesting too, how this relates, this maybe it's the codependency, I don't know, but over the past 2 years especially, we were told that we had to, or else we were murderers, make other people comfortable and safe, and we had to do it at the expense of our own comfort and safety, and if we didn't, we were the assholes, we were horrible, we were murderers, and all of these things. And I don't know anymore if anyone even knows what they want. Like, could they even become not codependent? Because they're like, the passion and the will has been like stripped from them, because all they know is how to like bow to whoever the loudest, craziest person is who's demanding of them that they behave in a certain way. On day one, when someone said to me like, I can't go outside because I have such and such immune disease, so you have to wear a mask, I was like, no, you can fuck yourself. I don't care where you go or don't go. I'm not in charge of where you go or don't go. If it's a danger for you to go there in any way, no matter who's doing what, that's all on you. Like, I thought that was obvious, but that is not obvious, apparently.
No, our values got inverted.
Yeah.
Right? Within 2 years, we became responsible for everybody else. Yeah. I don't have to do a fucking thing.
No.
0 things are my responsibility. Yes. They're all yours.
Right.
I take care of myself, you take care of you. You're immunocompromised, whatever it is, your fibromyalgia, your bullshit Munchausen's hysteria is not my responsibility, and I don't care.
No. And then they're like, you're heartless and you're selfish. I'm like,
no, I'm not. No. I'm just a normal person, and I won't be abused by you.
Yeah. And you're actually heartless and selfish. You want the whole world to bend over for the one person? That doesn't even make sense. Yeah.
Yeah, it's incredible. I couldn't imagine making the demands on other people that have been made on all of us by at least half this country for the past 2.5 years. When I started this show, Lindsay, when I started Disaffected in January of 21, I always said, we're going to talk about the behavior of the extreme left and the woke left. I don't say that anymore because it's not the extreme left anymore. It's the mainstream left.
That's a good point.
We may be at a point right now as we record this. It's, what is it today? April 25th, April 26th. We may be at a point. It feels to me like some things are shifting a little bit. That we sane people may be gaining a little ground. I'm not an optimist, and I don't hope is not my thing. I don't do hope. So I'm very cautious about this. But we have forgotten. We have forgotten. Oh, I was going to say we've forgotten a lot of things in the past 2 years, but that's not exactly true because we were prepared for this. We were damaged to a great degree. We had to be damaged because we wouldn't have accepted it if we weren't. We don't know our Constitution. We literally don't know it. We don't understand what our rights are. There are people, millions of Americans out there, who literally do not understand that we have a constitutionally protected right to travel among the states without border checks.
Yeah.
They literally don't know this. So when you don't know it, you get people saying, oh, well, I guess you shouldn't have driven your car into Rhode Island with outside plates. You were told that you had to stay in quarantine. What is wrong with you?
Yeah, who do you think has the power to enforce this illegal
Did you grow up in Beijing? I mean, what country do you think you're in?
Yeah.
And you're right that people may not even know that there's another way to live, but there is, because living this way as a codependent, if we want to term it that way, is a living death.
Mm-hmm.
It's a living death. There's no dignity in it. There's no satisfaction. There's no self-reliance. There's nothing you can depend on. It's degrading.
Yeah, I love that's actually very similar to what I was saying right at the beginning of all this too. Is like, hey, if you're going to react to all of this out of fear and you're going to go along with it because you're scared, you may as well be dead, right? There is no point then. What is life if you're just going to cower in fear and do whatever you're told, right? You have to have some sort of passion and will and drive and knowing who you are and what you believe in and don't believe in and where is your line. If your line isn't the mask, if it isn't being forced to stay in your home, if it isn't being illegally kept in certain states or not, if it isn't all of that, like, what is it then? What is it? I don't know. I don't care what it is even, but like, probably you should have one somewhere. I
think a lot of people don't have a line, Lindsay.
Yeah, that's what blew my mind.
There's nothing they won't do when they're told.
They will harm their own children. I mean, that's
yes, they will.
Obvious, I guess now. But
happily, I believe they're being good parents doing it.
They'll take pictures of it and celebrate it and say,
it's
"Look
sick.
at me."
It's
yeah,
sick.
It is sick. It is so sick.
I mean, the worst, of course, is the transing of children.
Yeah.
This is astonishing to me. Do you know what that is? This is Munchausen syndrome by proxy.
Tell people what that means.
You will recognize it, most of you. And I'm hoping you will have a light bulb moment where you say, how the hell did I not see that transing was this too? If you remember, Munchausen's syndrome by proxy is when a caregiver or a parent intentionally sickens a child or their dependent in order to get social and narcissistic gratification for being a put upon caregiver. So it is almost exclusively a mother's sin. It's almost always women who do this. This is a female thing. Men abuse in different ways. This is a woman's specialty. It's the mother who puts poison in her children's soup, makes them sick so that she can be a put upon mother, or who fakes cancer in her daughter, or fakes some sort of disability so that she can be featured on the news and get a place at the Ronald McDonald House and be the mother of the year. Mm. It's related to the same phenomenon that drives pageant mothers, right? There is no more extreme form of Munchausen's by proxy than putting your kids on chemicals like Lupron that stop their puberty, deranging their minds by telling them that they are actually born in the wrong body, and then setting them up for surgery to have their breasts removed if they're a girl, or to have their testicles removed and their penis inverted to create a faux vagina as a boy. This is Mengele level mutilation. I did an episode on this, and I opened it with that famous scene. Do you know the movie The Sixth Sense? You remember that classic horror movie from the late 90s?
That's where it was. I remembered. I'm like, I saw this in like a show or something.
Yep.
Yeah.
I played the show. One of the vignettes was a mother with Munchausen syndrome by proxy who killed her daughter. She posed as having a sick daughter, but she killed her daughter through poison, and she was discovered at the funeral. We all know what that was, and those of us who are conscious and adults in the 90s remember there was a lot of public talk about this. It was sort of a media sensation for a while. So if you remember that scene from The Sixth Sense, that's Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Now, I want you to, I'm talking to people like they can actually talk back to us, but they can't, of course. In your own mind, ask yourself this question. Look at that scene in that movie, and then look at mothers transing their children and ask yourself why you didn't see it before.
Like, what is the meaningful difference? There is none.
There is none, because that's what it is.
Yeah.
What's different is that we have, and this is the depravity of our society. We not only don't see it, we fucking clap for it.
We will take kids away from the
one. We cry
happy
tears for it. What a beautiful mommy she is for loving her transgender daughter. It is the most perverse, Freudian, disgusting obscenity I've ever seen.
We will literally take kids away from the parent who's trying to protect the kid from the money.
And I want to see these parents doing that to these children. I want them in prison for the rest of their fucking lives as the child abusers they are. And I want those doctors in prison, and I want those politicians in prison. I'm not going to get what I want, but that's what they deserve.
Well, you are the one who alerted me to this. There's some doctor that you featured who, I actually love the word yeet. When I was still teaching, it came out, and we actually did a conjugation chart. I made them conjugate the verb yeet, and it was really fun.
Nice!
Yeah, it was cool. So I adopted that slang myself, but you brought up this doctor who said something like, I only get to yeet 4 teats this week.
Teats this week. Sad face. She's a psychopath.
Yeah.
You're looking at a psychopath.
Like, because if you just replace that with any other surgery, you'd be like, what's wrong with you? Like, I only get to take out 4 parts of colons today or something. Like, you want to do this? Like, what's your goal in life? I get that you provide this service, but I don't think it should be like a joy and a passion for you to cut people up. Like, thank you for being able to do it, but that's a bit much. So you replace it with teats. It's not different. It's still psycho. It's more psycho because it's children and it doesn't serve a medical purpose.
Absolutely. Let me turn the screw a little bit tighter. You know why else a doctor like that gets away with it? Replace her with a man.
Yeah.
Imagine a man doctor saying that. What would your reaction be?
Yeah. You'd be like, you're harming women. He hates women.
Yeah.
This is the other thing I love that you bring up. Very rare. I think me and you are the only 2 people I know who criticize women because women are on this pedestal. It's like this sacred cow. You can't touch it. Poor women. We've always been so oppressed and like so victimized, to the point where people like Amber or whatever can like take a shit on his bed and people are like, good for her, go girl. And I'm like, what?
Girl boss. Yeah. You showed him.
What the hell is happening right now? Why can't women be criticized?
What's happening is that, yes, and I call it the sacred caste syndrome. We have sacred castes right now, and when you become a member of a sacred caste, you are all good, you are not capable of abuse, and no one may say anything negative about you, and if they do, they're an oppressor. Yeah. Black people are a sacred caste, trans people are a sacred caste, women are a sacred caste. And believe me, for all this cart belly aching about the patriarchy, and I used to spout this shit myself, because I spent a long time. This was not these women's fault. This was my issue. But I was the best boy feminist male you could ever ask for, and I carried water for these bitches for a long time because I was trying to earn my mother's love. That's why I was doing that. I didn't know why at the time. But the reality is, we do not live in a patriarchy. And right now, society has been thoroughly feminized in its values. And I'm not saying that women themselves, female typical traits are evil. I'm not saying that, but it's out of balance right now. And the narcissistic and predatory women have a perfect social cover. And they are instilling those values. And we will not talk back against it because modern feminism has been so successful at cowing us and making us believe that any criticism of women is misogyny. I mean, the word sexism simply stopped being used about 7 years ago and was replaced with misogyny. So even a mildly sexist joke is now inflated to, you don't just disregard women, you hate them.
You hate all of them.
It's nonsense.
Yeah.
There are misogynists in the world, but they're about as rare as they've ever been.
Yeah.
Most people are not misogynists, just like most people aren't personality disordered.
Yeah. And the what was I gonna say? Totally lost it.
Well, I think I see the stick that women like you get for saying these things too. I mean, it's unpopular for a man to say it, but when a woman says it,
I'm a self-hating
you're treated
woman.
by other women as a traitor.
Yeah.
Right? And we all hate traitors. We hate traitors more than we hate the enemy because we think, you were one of us and now you're on the enemy's side. So I know a lot of women who agree and who see this same problem going on right now, and they are treated so badly by other women. Yeah,
I'm a self-hating woman. I'm evil. I'm just trying to get in with the guys or something. I'm like, okay,
right,
whatever. But this is what I was gonna say. That whole believe all women thing. I'm like, that's just patently absurd. Just replace women with anything else. Believe all men. Believe all cows. Believe all children.
All cows.
Believe nothing from any group. There's never be just a group that you believe completely, and it's insane.
Yeah, that's a command. What that translated into plain English, that is shut your brain off.
Yeah, don't think.
And it's wrapped up with another societal value that we all act like is normal and it isn't. Don't judge. Stop judging. Why are you judging? That's what that is turn your brain off.
Yeah.
Don't discriminate between right and wrong. Don't evaluate moral claims. Don't stick up for somebody who's actually being hurt against a bully or an aggressor. Shut your brain off. Don't judge.
And really, you need judgment and discernment to survive any situation, but especially these. Yeah. Well, speaking of that, I feel like a lot of those arguments now are, and it's weird because again, like you said, 10 years ago, if I heard myself saying this, I'd be like, oh, you asshole. But a lot of these same arguments are now being used to, become apologists for pedophilia. They were like, well, it's just an orientation. They're born this way. They can't help it. They just love children and la, la, la.
Who cares?
Don't judge them. Why are you judging them? And all of this shit. I'm like,
because they're pedophiles.
Yeah, I want you to die, actually. This is one of the times I think capital punishment should be used, like that for you, like that for those people. But it's so weird to see. I don't think many are accepting it. It's weird to see it even at all. And it has been much more than ever before. And it's crazy.
Oh, there's a lot of acceptance. It doesn't have to. Here's the thing. I don't think most people actually accept it, but that doesn't matter. What lives inside your little brain that you won't share with the rest of the world is no goddamn help to the rest of us because y'all sit silently and don't say anything against it.
That's true. Because people are afraid.
So that is acceptance. It's tacit acceptance.
That's a great point.
You can tell me, well, it's just a bunch of extreme people. Yeah, but you're not saying anything. So the more you don't say anything, the more these extreme people get normalized. We're watching it right in front of us. It's infected every public school in this country.
That's true. That whole groomer thing is actually grooming. When you want little children to be able to talk to you about sex, not have to tell the parents about it, the parents don't have to give permission for it, that's grooming. When you have secrets between you and a child of a sexual nature, which is what me telling you my sexual identity and you not being able to tell my parents, that is what that is. That's grooming. We used to call that grooming.
It is grooming. And guess what? We talk about, and who's doing it? Women.
Yeah.
Women.
Yeah.
The vast majority are women. The public school teachers, the librarians, the social workers, the traditionally female caring professions, nurses. It is women who want to have these sexual conversations and lessons about masturbation with 5 or 6-year-olds. They say it. I'm not making it up. They say it on TikTok. So don't tell me that sexual abuse of children is a male typical crime. It is clearly much more complicated than that. Because if men were saying any of the things that these public school teachers who are women are saying right now, this country would be in an uproar right now.
Agreed. Yeah, it's really sickening. Maybe this is why I didn't make it in public education, but did you know, I don't know if you'd heard this, that there's somewhere in California, of course, they're offering anybody who is trans universal basic income. Did you see that?
Yes.
Like, what better way to get a bunch of people to identify as trans?
Well, I'm moving there right now. Tomorrow I'm going to be a lady.
Yeah, like, why not? Free money.
I want my free money. It's crazy.
It's crazy. Oh, God. As someone who you were literally kicked off Twitter. I think you're shadow banned on Twitter also, and I
think so too.
Even on your other account.
Yep.
So what's your take on this whole Elon Musk thing? Like, have you seen a bunch of people suddenly jump onto your subscriber, or did you get your account back, or did anything happen?
I haven't got the account back yet. It's early days. He just bought the company, yesterday or the day before. It seems like the excessive moderation and the excessive banning cooled off, but it's too early for me. I have no idea what's going on internally. I have no idea what the new management team has done. I don't think we're going to know what it's going to look like for a while. My hope, I will tell you, I am glorying in the frustration and the impotent screams from the blue checks. I love it. I find their pain and suffering succulent and delicious.
Yes.
And I think they have every moment of it coming. But I don't know that we know what's actually going to happen. My hope, if Elon Musk is serious about his commitment to free speech the way he's represented, and I have to think he's serious, because that's a lot of money even for him.
Yeah.
Right? This is not a lark. I'm not saying he's a perfect person. Then my hope is that, number one, I want to see a destruction of the cultural idea at Twitter and other social media that they have a responsibility to safety, that they have a responsibility to community cohesion. They do not. The only things they should be stopping are actual incitement to violence, actual harassment that meets the legal definition of harassment. That's it. I don't care if you find I don't care if somebody from the KKK gets on there and says N-word, N-word, N-word. And the only reason I'm saying N-word right now is because YouTube might ban you if I say the real word, which is ridiculous.
Right.
I don't care. You do not have a right to be protected from that. You do not have a reasonable expectation to be emotionally safe from that. If you don't like it, talk back and call them the bigots they are, and bring your friends. Yeah. So I want to see that gone. I want to see, I don't know this for a fact, but by deduction, it has to be the case that an extraordinary number of woke and probably alleged trans women are running the engineering at Twitter, men who call themselves women. The fastest, you will get banned for even the slightest allusion to the fact that they might be male. Yeah. Get rid of them. Clear these bastards out. Half of these people are clinically insane. Get them out of the company. No more of this. No more safety. No more misinformation. Let it go. We have got to get rid of that. That's what I hope will happen. What do you think will happen?
I think that will happen to a degree. I really see one of the main things he said was that he wants to verify all humans, which sounds great because
that worries me a little.
Yeah, that worries me. Like, it sounds good because the bots are very annoying. It's very annoying that we can falsely inflate something and falsely deflate something. So to even that out would be great. To watch things organically happen again would be great. But I do think his verifying of humanness is leading towards the digital identification and the digital wallets and all of the things.
Yeah, and I can't go, if that's the case, I can't go with that.
Yeah.
I'm not taking the microchip. I'm not submitting my biometrics to you. I will not give up cash.
Yeah.
No. No.
Yes. So that's my worry, is that this is just more of a control structure integration thing and systemization. So
I think we need to be very careful and very measured in our hopes and aspirations for this. I think we need to watch out for the downsides. Every person is flawed. Every approach has flaws to it. There will be problems. I hope Elon Musk, and I think he has a good chance of actually making substantive improvements, first to Twitter, but I think that's going to have a knock-on effect culturally.
that'd be cool.
And it may happen to other social media platforms. But I don't think he's a god king, and I don't think he's a savior. And I'm going to be just as careful evaluating his motivations as I would be anybody else. But it can't be any worse.
Yeah.
It cannot be any worse than what
Literally.
we've been living with.
Yeah, just the pure abolishment of specific opinions has been just totally crazy, especially that people celebrated it. But that's where we're at. Speaking of that, what do you think is the greatest danger facing the world today? And we'll start to wind down so you can go enjoy your evening.
Greatest danger facing the world today.
No pressure or anything, just pick the worst one.
I think there are a lot of big dangers, and I'm not as confident anymore saying what I think the worst ones are. But my bias is I hate this phrase, but I don't know a better one. I think the proliferation of cluster B personality disorders, I believe the numbers of people who have them are increased sharply at a rate they have never increased before in history. And I think that though it's still a minority of people, cluster B values have now been affirmed. I think cluster B and its associated psychological dynamics are a genuine moral and public health crisis. The public health crisis is the phrase I hate, and I'm almost sorry I used it. But I think you know what I mean.
Yes.
And how do we stop it? There are a lot of things that need to change. Parenting needs to change. Our fundamentals need to change. We need to go back to some of the values we used to have. There's no golden age of the past where everything was perfect, and we can't simply replicate what people did 100 years ago without adapting it. I understand that. But we need to go back to boundaries. We need parents to go back to being parents and stop being their children's friends. Parents need to be a whole lot more secure in who they are and stop trying to get validation through the image that their children project onto the world. We need to face consequences for our bad behavior. We need to bring back public shame and modesty. Yeah, I know what I sound like, but that's what I believe. I think we need some old-fashioned values brought back.
I would agree with you. It's because it infects everything. When you're saying public health crisis, I'm like, it infects government, it infects industry, it infects our social milieu again, and all of those things are what create the world the way it is. So it's very important, and we need more people to heal so that we can come back from this huge degradation. Yeah. So what? Even though you're not,
you're part of it. You're part of it. Thank you for having your show. I'm glad that we've met each other. This is important work. We need you. We need so many of the other podcasts that are adjacent to this. We're doing what we can. I appreciate you. I'm glad you're out there, and I'm glad to be on your side.
Oh, I'm so glad. I'm very, very happy to have found you as well. I know you're not into hope, but what is your greatest hope for what happens next?
Some swing of the pendulum back toward something closer to sanity. That's my hope.
It has to, right? It swung that way. It has to come back. Fingers crossed.
You think so? I'm not so sure.
Yeah.
I do worry, actually. I do worry that we may be in terminal decline. I don't know if that's the case, but it is a possibility that I think is very plausible. We may be at the end of Western civilization as we've known it. I hope that is not the case.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's a schizophrenic's fever dream to think that it's possible.
I'm totally with you. That is one of my greatest fears of what is going to happen next. Well, now's the time where you get to plug your show. Anything else you have going on, whatever you want to invite people to, or whatever, let them know.
Well, I'd love you to watch my show. We do a TV show. We call it, it's a podcast, but I mean, it's a real produced TV show. Sunday nights, 9 p.m. U.S. Eastern time on YouTube. The premiere goes out, and we do 3 audio-only episodes of the show. They're shorter, about half hour, 3 times a week. You get that through your podcast app. You won't find it on YouTube. We're the Disaffected podcast, and would love to have your eyes and ears. So thanks for anybody who's interested.
Yeah, and the production quality is exceptional, I might add. Well, it's so awesome to have you tonight. What are your final thoughts or words you want to leave people with?
My housemate is making something that has so much garlic in it that my stomach is rumbling, and I hope that your dinner is as delicious as mine.
That is exciting. I'm excited to find out what it was. Well, thank you so much.
It's some kind of pasta.
Yeah. I love it.
Oh, look, okay, I'll leave you with this. She just put this, okay, this is how much garlic you put in. If anybody wants to know how much garlic to put in a recipe, the amount is too much.
Yes.
Also, good for vampires.
Which is exactly what we're trying to stave off here. Well, stick around for just another minute, Josh, and thank you so much for being here tonight. And fellow travelers of the path, it is a beautiful thing. This has been your analog, electric, concentric dose of wisdom, according to the host of the powerful and beautiful Disaffected podcast, Josh Slocum. Josh, thank you so much for sharing with us tonight and for being here. And the slick slide down into the worst of hells seems inevitable when we see the chaos incited by the psychopathic elite, as well as their host army of narcissists, borderline personality disordered, and self-abdicating shells of humans. The truth is, they're just the loudest, they're not the most common, or the truest, or the brightest. They simply were handed more grease for the sloping descent and bigger cameras with which to film themselves pouring it on the tracks. But when we draw our eyes away from the spectacle, reorient ourselves with truth and logic at hand, we can see that most of the scene was left out of the picture. There are just as many paths up as down. Some are open and waiting wide for our traversal, and all we need to do is walk in their direction. Let the slimy fall down the paths they've created. We don't need them to come with us. And until you choose the path that serves you best and walk it, travel well, aim for balance, and always look inside first. Mwah.
The Bilderbergers called you, and I was like, hello? Ain't nobody answering shit, man. I mean, for real, man. I must have hung up. Phone rang again. And I was like, hello? Ain't nobody even answering, dog. Some real shit, man. They tapping my telephone. It's really the real when you step to the plate. And it ain't too late to change your ways of being fake. Humans create with creativity, so make what you create to shine through. All niggas wanna do is shine. Make your view rhyme, but the deaf to the blind. For those left behind, I crept and I climbed to the top of my mind. And I found I've been taught to be conformed, and I was never warned of the signs. Crimes committed as an adolescent, now I'm trapped to the system stressing it. With aggression and emotive, through passion and emotion, to set the truth in motion. They gave me Zola for a rainy day. And they gave me Zyprexa to sleep my life away. Society's labeled a man to be bipolar. Might as well gave me heroin and Coca-Cola. This is how Western medicines work. This is also how Western religions work. And Americans work 9 to 5. Not asking the questions of how, when, where, what, and why. I remain on the quest thirsty for salvation. With a taste of blood, with a fallen warrior's dream of surviving this flood of chaos. Those who continue to judge a book by its cover are way off. Breaking these laws of a scarred prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chances of life to revive an immortal lie. Breaking these bars of a scarred prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chances of life to revive an immortal lie.
We're conditioned to be housebroken and weekend. Labor all week, pay them, and with the rest, drown away the weekend. Wires and voltages set strategically to damage chakras. Make sure to take those prescriptions given to you by the doctor. Wash it down with contaminated water. Worship a holy father, eat trash food, remain drained from the slaughter. Mother Nature's now the Illuminati's daughter. through molestation, unnoticed by the blind mind in every nation. Not allowed to know God is present in each and every individual. Ancient truth forgotten except the Bohemian Grove rituals. Inbred bloodlines created unruly ruling class of elites cold as reptiles. The awoken even see the signs on the streets. Encryptions passed off as fiction and paranoia reaction. 33s and bows with skulls are laughing right now with Kennedy's assassin. Two pillars burning. History repeats as I babble on truth. Write down our fate for centuries. I change their plans when I'm up in the booth.
Everlasting pressures on life got me up in the night, not knowing if I'm wrong or right. Something within me tells me to fight, and it's like I'm trying to find the true nature of being God-like versus religious beliefs, which indeed tells me I'm doomed from day one out the womb. They want us to be consumed with fear, with negative thoughts engineered to fear God, and that's to fear oneself, and that's real. You tell me that I'm imperfect, how is that when everything's for a reason? You forget that everything is meant to be. But they got us withering away, not knowing sacred geometry, which degrades philosophy of every soul, in which they try to control your mind with limitations, over exceeding your expectations. You'll be considered an outcast with lacerations, so I continue to master patience, creating ways to make it through the Piscean age that's getting close to the Aquarian stage. As I stand strong on my God-given rod, it's my life against all odds to penetrate these imprisoned walls that creates flaws and false laws. So y'all niggas better recognize before you die, before you had the chance to survive. And that's breaking these walls of a scar prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chance to survive, to revive an immortal lie. Breaking these bars of a scar prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chance to survive, to revive an immortal lie. Breaking these bars of a scar prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chance to survive, to revive an immortal lie. Breaking these bars of a scar prison, reminiscing of pain, taming niggas up in the system. Got us living a lie with a cry, nobody hears ya. Chance to survive, to revive an immortal lie.